Hello, and welcome back to Blumira Briefings, your weekly download of the top headlines and trends for your security practice. This week, a phishing kit jumping over MFA like a gymnast over a subway turnstile, a SharePoint remote code execution bug that lets one logged-in user run the whole server, and a ransomware crew that doesn't bother trying to break in and just jiggles the handle to check for an unlocked door instead. Let's go. The FBI is flagging a phishing kit called Kali365, leading to an attacker in the middle attack. Nothing too novel here. The kit passes the login info through in real time, skimming your password on the way through, and more importantly, your session cookie, or effectively your session avatar. Handed over and the attacker is effectively you. MFA is already satisfied. There's no second prompt. So Jake, our problem used to be getting people to enable MFA. What should they do now that attackers are focused on the next step of that defeating access security?
So this Kali365 phishing as a service platform, it might sound scary and people are unsure of what it's doing. At the end of the day, it's presenting the same problem to us defenders that we've been trying to solve for like the last decade or so. And that's trying to secure these external accounts. How do we secure people no matter where they are, instead of trying to build this digital moat that we used to be so focused on around like organizations and like a singular network boundary. Now the problem has shifted and we're trying to build similar moats around people no matter where they are. So it's kind of, as much as we want to focus on Kali365 platform, it's not presenting any new problems. I think at the end of the day, the thing to focus on is identity is gold for attackers nowadays. There's no escaping it. They're going to do whatever they can to try and get access to usernames, passwords, email addresses. Like session tokens are big nowadays because it gets them access to things that they shouldn't have access to, obviously. And basically it tricks systems into thinking they are who they say they are, even though they're stealing somebody else's account and stealing somebody else's identity. So the thing I want people to focus on is not necessarily focusing on the boundary, like securing the boundary. It's important. And I know we got a lot of this talk about like using phishing resistant MFA like FIDO, but that's kind of in the same vein as what we've been talking about for the last few years. It's like everybody was harping on MFA, and now we're starting to see attackers find ways around it. I'm not saying attackers have a way to get around FIDO or they're like this phishing resistant, but the second they do, they're going to put a lot of effort into it. And the second they do, it's going to be off the rails. Then we're going to have to start recommending other things. So at the end of the day, you should be focusing on securing that boundary is important, but also considering what attackers can get access to after they've accessed an account. It's going to happen sooner or later, no matter what security you have on an account. So the best thing to do is have a very solid like incident response plan, and then also make sure that you have the tools in place to be able to like identify when these things happen, identify what an attacker did after they got access to an account, what documents did they access? Did they exfiltrate anything? So I know we've got a lot of focus on securing the boundary, but I want to also like shift that focus a little bit just to say like it's going to happen. So when it does happen, make sure you've got the tools and the processes, procedures, everything available to you so that you can know like the attacker, what they did, what they accessed, what they got away with, what they didn't access, and making sure that if something is compromised, you're able to kind of close that gap and kick the attacker out as soon as possible, and then also know what they did while they were inside. I know things like, because people say like, do this, do that. A lot of these problems come down to things being too expensive, either through money, it's just literally too expensive for certain licenses, or it might be too expensive for resources. You might not have the people available to deploy these rules. It might be too difficult to deploy certain security tools or certain processes, or there's also a lot of fear of adding friction to legitimate users. You don't want to scare people away from security by making things too secure and too hard to get into, even when you are the legitimate user. So I think the best piece of advice is, like I said, kind of focus on what attackers get access to. And also the biggest thing is for the boundary side of things, just start seeing if you can apply conditional access policies. Both M365 and Google Workspace have these policies, and that would be like the next best thing that I would say after MFA. I know everybody keeps on MFA, enable MFA. That's still true. Don't just take this message as like, oh, I can just skip MFA. But also take that extra step of doing conditional access policies, making it so that users have to check certain boxes to be able to log in. And I find that a lot of that is generally pretty frictionless in terms of like legitimate users. They're really not going to feel the pain from conditional access policies, or they shouldn't. And then you should focus on like configuring those policies so they are frictionless. And then that introduces a big layer of friction for those actual attackers, the people that you don't want getting in. So those would be the things I would focus on, is conditional access policies, getting those deployed and seeing what you can do to secure environment that way, and also having good ways of being able to tell when an attacker got in, what they accessed, what they were able to get away with, and all that kind of stuff. So just run tabletops or use some kind of compromise and event to work off of. And just see what you're missing, see what you weren't able to figure out, and see what you can do to deploy things so that you can answer those questions next time.
Moving now from the inbox to the intranet. If you're running Microsoft SharePoint Server, this month's Patch Tuesday should jump right to the top of your list. It addresses a deserialization flaw, CVSS 8.8, and CISA has already introduced it to my least favorite KEV, the Known Exploited Vulnerabilities catalog, so we know it is out there getting used right now. The small catch, the attacker needs site owner permissions first, but then once in, they can run any arbitrary code on the server. So Matt, for a admin whose shoulders are up by their ears after hearing active exploitation this morning, what's their patch and verify playbook?
For admins, the first immediate step is straightforward. Patch your SharePoint servers right now if you haven't done so already. Don't schedule a maintenance weekend. Don't wait for more information. Treat this as an active security event. Now, after patching, organizations should also verify that exposed SharePoint instances are not directly accessible from the internet unless absolutely necessary. If external access is required, place it behind additional protections. VPN access, conditional access policies, reverse proxies that require authentication are one of my personal favorites. There's also, identity-aware gateways that could be used to accomplish something similar. The second thing admins should do is assume that attackers may already be scanning for vulnerable systems. That means reviewing logs for suspicious activity, especially suspicious PowerShell execution, unexpected service creation, web shell indicators, or even outbound connections originating from SharePoint servers. That's always a pretty big tell. Now, this is the part that often gets skipped during emergency patch cycles that I want to bring up today. Validating backups. A lot of organizations discover during incidents that their SharePoint backups or Exchange or whatever systems are in place aren't current, aren't isolated, or can't even be restored cleanly. I've been there in the past, and I know a lot of other people that have as well. That's what makes this a good moment to verify that you can actually use your restore procedures before you need them under pressure at like 2 a.m. when leadership's calling you on the phone. They want an update every 5 minutes. That's reality. That is something that does happen. Now, I think that aside from that, there is a proactive takeaway here that's important to talk about, and that's that legacy collaboration platforms, they tend to become invisible critical infrastructure over time. I mean, think about it. They sit quietly. They're workhorses. They do what they need to do. They're often stable, and eventually they stop getting the same scrutiny as perimeter systems or cloud services. Organizations should always inventory systems like SharePoint, Exchange, Confluence, line of business applications, like if you're using Blackbaud or Sage for accounting, something like that, and even old file sharing appliances. Kind of still see those in computer rooms every now and then. Anything that's internally trusted but externally reachable. And always make sure that they're included in regular vulnerability management and attack surface reviews. Attackers absolutely remember that these systems exist, even when organizations forget that they do. So let's just sum everything up. Patch immediately. Restrict exposure where possible. Always actively seek signs of compromise. Validate backups. And review older collaboration infrastructure before the next emergency advisory lands.
And then proving that the best exploit stays, not needing an exploit at all, attackers are running automated scans across the internet for MongoDB, Elasticsearch, MySQL, and Redis databases using default settings with authentication switched off. They find one, they wipe it, they leave the ransom note, and they move on to the next. These are effectively unlocked cars with the keys in the ignition and the engine running, and so somebody just had to write a script to drive down all the streets at once. As much as it's tempting to say, did you really double-click through character creation defaults and then leave that poor defenseless database open to the internet? What'd you expect to happen? We can be bigger people than that, focus on the fix and what to do next. So Mike, after these admins are done kicking themselves, what should they do next?
This is actually a pretty wild study. So over the last 5 years, they've been looking at databases and ransomware activity in the databases. They basically identified around 30,000 databases that were compromised, and effectively someone either wiped them or locked them and left a note saying like it's a ransom, right? So it's weird. Like, people hear about ransomware and they think of like somebody getting into a file share or a bunch of servers and encrypting them, or like physically locking up desktops and putting ransom notes in the background. But there's definitely an economy around ransomwareing databases, especially on the internet. The 30,000 is not a shock to me at all. I bet if you did some showdown scanning, it's the number of databases you would see on the internet is like scary and would probably make you want to cry. For this, it's pretty wild to me whenever I hear that there's a database directly on the internet or directly internet accessible. I don't know why people would ever do that. That seems crazy to me. We have the technology. There are many ways to architect a secure way to do this, right? Like whether you're using proxies or, VPCs or cross-region networking. Lots of ways to do this. Don't ever put your database on the internet. I don't know how else to say it, I guess. If you're running certain kinds of databases, don't put them on the internet, right? MongoDB should never be on the internet, and yet it always is. There are a lot of them. It's kind of insane. I'm thinking like SQL, any kind of SQL server, right? Like any query language server, any kind of Elk stack, Elasticsearch. If you're directly collecting telemetry from things across the world and dumping into an Elk stack, put a front end service on that. Use a proxy. Like, I don't get it, because why wouldn't people create scripts to search the internet and just encrypt these things? It's free money. The study's pretty wild too. It goes into like the fact that almost nobody pays. But when they do, it's enough to keep these services going, or these crews going. But a lot of people just either roll DR and I guess don't need the data anymore, or treat it as an outage or what. But pretty wild. Like the number of people that don't pay is like very high. This is not shocking as someone who used to work for an internet scanning company, but also just sad, I guess. And if you're doing this, just stop doing this. Like, please go to your local LLM and ask it how to get it off the internet as fast as possible. So, all right.
So, this week, a kit that uses your session like one of those creepy Mission Impossible masks, a SharePoint bug still thriving in the wild because of slow patching, and a random success story standing on the shoulders of unsecured databases. That's it for me this week. Until next time, stay safe out there.